Hi guys, I'm smoking my Dr. Plum pipe, and in it I've got some Ratteray's Accountant mixture. And unfortunately I've only got about another pipe full of that left. It dates from 1963 and it's a beautiful smoke. This is a VR to London Calling to Simon, who's on his 3000th sub-GAW and 3-year GAW. And he asks for a time when, through a period of reflection, we've made a decision that's had a great effect on our lives or on a situation. This is quite a difficult one for me in a way. It dates back to when I was a spirituality advisor for the Diocese of Chester, and my job was to help people find the best form of prayer for them, to find spiritual directors, to do teaching, run weekends and that kind of thing. And I'd been asked to run a weekend for 2 deaneries of clergy. They wanted a retreat and they asked me to run it, which I said, yes, of course I will. But then, unfortunately, somebody who I considered a very, very, very good friend, a very strong friendship, I thought, wrote to the deanery saying under no circumstances could he attend the weekend if I was taking it because I was evil, because I was a Freemason, I was a Satanist. And it got very, very difficult. For a start, it was an incredible shock to me because we'd worked together on weekends. We'd run some weekends called GAW weekends, which were a renewal and growth weekend for lay people. And, you know, it was just a shock. He hadn't said anything to me about it. He knew I was a Freemason. We talked sort of about it. Everybody knew. But anyway, I got a telephone call from the secretary who was organising this weekend, who sort of said that he was in a very difficult position. Because having asked me to run the weekend, he was now faced with at least half the people not being willing to attend because of what this guy had said about me. He was very embarrassed, and I said, look, you know, if it makes it easier for you, I'll not run the weekend, you know, find somebody else. If either of the deaneries wants to talk to me about, you know, being a Freemason, then I'm willing to talk to them about it. I'm willing to tell them about it as far as I can. And he was very grateful and said, thank you. A couple of days later, I got a telephone call from somebody in those deaneries who said that he had fought a war against what was happening to me. And I said, look, what do you mean? And he said, well, I've just been to a meeting where the bishop says he can't understand how anybody like you can be a Christian. And unfortunately, it was my bishop, my area bishop, who had said it. He'd been told that there was a clergyman who was a Freemason. He hadn't been given a name. And he just said, well, I can't conceive of them being a Christian. You know, that's certainly an evil thing. So I rang him up and said, we need to talk. And he said, well, why? I said, because you've said publicly that I'm not a Christian. And he said, no, I haven't. I've never said that. I said, you have. And I told him about the telephone call and about the situation. He said, "Oh my God, I didn't know it was you." So he agreed to come round as soon as he could, and he came round within an hour and said to me, "Look, you know, I know you're a Christian. He said, I was one of the ones that proposed you for this job. He said, I really didn't realise it was you." I said, "Well, you do now. And you've really messed things up. I want you to say publicly that you know, that I am a Christian, that you've no doubts about me." And he said, "I can't do that." He said, "It made me falling out with those two deaneries. They'll be..." So I said, "Well, you know, what's it to be? Me or them?" But anyway, the whole job began to fall apart because there were people who were wanting me to run weekends and people who weren't. And I had a support group that had a solicitor on it, a church army sister, a doctor, and one or two other people. They supported me in the work that I was doing. And the archdeacon, they asked to meet the archdeacon, who's a legal officer in the church, and said, "Look, what are you going to do about this situation?" And he said, "Well, I don't know what we can do. We're running around like headless chickens." So he said, "Well, all it takes is for somebody to sort of say that you're backing Stephen." And he said, "We can't do that." And the solicitor said, "Well, would you like me to take you to court?" And he said, "Well, you can't do that because we're not under the law in the way that ordinary people are under the law. We can't be put on trial for slander or for things like that." Anyway, my friend, or my so-called friend, we had a clergy weekend where all the clergy in the diocese had to attend, and it got really messy. None of the hierarchy were actually saying what was happening, but the weekend was dividing into two. And it came to a communion service, and my ex-friend came up to me and said, "You know, the peace be with you," and wanted to exchange the peace. And I said, "Well, is peace with us?" You know, I said, "How can you ask to exchange the peace with somebody that you consider evil?" And as I say, it got very, very bad. And I spent a lot of time thinking about it, wondering what was best to do, wondering, you know, what it was all about. And I said to him, "Why did you say it?" And he said, "You stopped me getting a job." And I said, "Well, which job were you..." I said, "I didn't. You know, what job are you meaning?" And he said, "Well, before you took the spirituality thing, you were the spiritual director of GAW, and I wanted that job when you left." And I said, "Well, it's nothing to do with me. It's a lay appointment and has to be ratified by the bishop." And he said, "Well, the bishop wouldn't give me the job." So I said, "Well, I'm sorry, you know, it's nothing to do with me." Anyway, we separated, not having resolved anything really. In the end, what happened was that I said to the bishop, "Look, if it's going to help you, I'll fall on my sword and you can find somebody else as a spiritual advisor for the diocese." And he thanked me profusely for my humility and for helping him in that way. More of that later, but anyway. But the guy who was supposed to be my friend, we were to attend another service that he was going to be at. And I thought, I'd been thinking about what I could do for the best. And in the end, I decided that I had to forgive him. Not for his sake, but for my mental health. I couldn't carry around this hatred and dislike of him. And that's what I did. I approached him at the beginning of this meeting and said, you know, look, over what happened, I forgive you. And he burst into tears, and I said, well, you know, I said, I've forgiven you, and left it at that. But he wouldn't have anything to do with me after that. I think the fact that I'd said I'd forgiven him actually poured coals on his head, and he obviously felt either guilty or whatever, I don't know. But after reflection, it was the only thing I could do. As I say, it wasn't for his sake. I wish I could say it was. It wasn't. It was for my sake, for my well-being, and for, you know, to stop me from really becoming very, very ill. But it so happens that a few days later the bishop rang for me and said, I'm going to have to ask you and Carolyn to leave the diocese because we can't find a job for you both. And he found me, well, he didn't. We applied for a job in another diocese that wanted a married couple. And we were offered the job and given it, and he gave us very, very good references. But whilst I was waiting for clearance for what was then the CRB, the clearance to say that you had no offences against you, it kept taking a long time and I couldn't understand why. And then when I rang up, I was told my birth certificate wasn't acceptable and that I was actually adopted, which is not the way to find out. And I had a massive breakdown. But anyway, that's beside the point. That's nothing to do with the reflection. But as I say, after a period of reflection, that's what I decided to do. And I believe that it did help me. I believe it did change things and gave me the strength to say to the bishop, you know, if you want, I'll fall upon my sword, because they were just going round in circles for months. I hope that's something that you wanted. It's the only thing I could think of, really. I think you're doing great on your channel, and you know I hold you in very high regard and hope that your numbers keep going up and that you find a lot of satisfaction in what you're doing. And I think I'll end it there.